You are nothing. Do you understand me? Nothing. The words echoed through the marble halls of the throne room, but Nora barely flinched as she scrubbed at a stubborn stain on the floor. She had heard worse. 5 years of servitude in the royal palace had taught her that invisibility was a gift and silence was survival. Her hands moved in practiced circles, the rough bristles of the brush scraping against stone that had been polished by 1,000 hands before hers. It was 3 a.m, the only time she was allowed in this sacred space, when the court slept and the throne sat empty in the darkness. She preferred it this way. The throne was less intimidating without the Alpha King sitting in it, without the weight of royal eyes judging her existence. But tonight felt different. The air itself seemed to hum with an energy she could not name, making the small hairs on her arms stand on end. Nora paused, her brush hovering over the marble, and for reasons she could not explain, she looked up at the throne. Moonlight streamed through the high windows, casting silver shadows across the massive seat carved from ancient bloodstone. For just a moment, just one impossible moment, she felt something stir deep in her chest. Something that had been sleeping for so long, she had forgotten it existed. Then the doors burst open with a force that made her heart stop. Nora dropped her brush, the clatter obscenely loud in the silence, and scrambled backward on her hands and knees. She knew she should not be seen. Ever. That was the first rule of her existence, but it was too late. He stood in the doorway like a figure carved from nightmares and desire, his massive frame backlit by torches from the corridor beyond. Alpha King Damien had returned from the Northern Wars 2 weeks early, and he was covered in blood. Not his own, she realized with a sick twist in her stomach. Never his own. The king was a legend made flesh, a warrior whose very name made enemies surrender before. Battle began, and he was staring directly at her. Nora could not breathe. She pressed herself against the cold marble, making herself as small as possible, praying he would simply ignore her and pass through. Servants were meant to be invisible. She had perfected the art of being nothing. But Damien did not move. He stood frozen in the doorway, his chest heaving with breaths that seemed to come too fast, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His eyes, usually cold gray like winter storms, had shifted to the molten gold of his wolf, and they were locked on her with an intensity that made her skin burn. "Who are you?" His voice was barely more than a growl, rough and dangerous. It sent a primal shiver down her spine that she did not understand. Nora opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Who was she? She was no one. She had no family name, no pack affiliation, no wolf to call her own. She was simply Nora, the girl who cleaned the throne room in the hours before dawn. But before she could force any words past her lips, the king moved. He crossed the massive room in seconds, impossibly fast, and suddenly he was standing over her. Up close, he was even more terrifying. Blood spattered across his face and neck, his dark hair wild, his presence so overwhelming that she felt crushed beneath the weight of it. He leaned down, and Nora realized with horror that he was breathing her in, scenting her. His eyes closed, and a sound rumbled from his chest that was both human and animal, pleasure and pain twisted together. "Impossible," he whispered, but it sounded like a curse. "This is impossible." Then his eyes opened, and the gold had bled away to something darker, something almost afraid. "What is your name?" Damien asked again, and this time his voice was softer, but no less commanding. "Nora." She finally managed to speak, though her voice came out small and broken. "Just Nora. I cleaned the throne room. I am sorry, Your Majesty. I will leave. I should not have been. I am sorry." She tried to stand, to flee, but his hand shot out and caught her wrist. The contact was electric. The moment his skin touched hers, something exploded through Nora's body like lightning. She gasped, her eyes going wide, and she saw her own shock mirrored in his face. The king released her as if she had burned him, stepping back with a curse that would have made the priestesses faint. "How old are you?" he demanded. 22, Your Majesty." She cradled her wrist against her chest, still feeling the phantom heat of his touch. "When is your birthday?" "I do not know. I was found as an infant in the servant quarters. The head cook raised me." Nora did not understand why he was asking these questions, why he looked at her like she was a puzzle he could not solve. She was nothing. Everyone knew that. She did not even have a wolf. Damien ran a hand through his hair, leaving tracks of blood behind. He looked devastated. Actually devastated, as if she had delivered him. Terrible news instead of simply existing in his presence. "You need to leave," he said finally. "Leave this room. Leave the palace. Tonight." Nora blinked, confusion replacing fear. "Your Majesty, I do not understand. Have I offended you? I can clean another area if the throne room displeases you. Please, I have nowhere else to go. The palace is my home. That is the problem." His voice was hollow. "This palace can never be your home." Before she could ask what he meant, before she could process the strange grief in his eyes, he turned and walked away. She watched him disappear through a side door, leaving her alone in the throne room with more questions than answers, and a burning sensation on her wrist where he had touched her. Nora looked down at her skin. In the moonlight, she could swear she saw the faint outline of a mark, like a brand or a tattoo, in the exact shape of his fingers. But when she blinked, it was gone. She picked up her brush with shaking hands and went back to scrubbing the floor, trying to forget the way the Alpha King had looked at her. Like she was something precious and terrifying all at once. Like she was something that could destroy him. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. The next morning, Nora learned that the king had ordered a full investigation into every servant in the palace. Names, birth records, family histories, everything was being examined. The staff whispered nervously in the corridors, wondering what had prompted such scrutiny. But Nora knew. Somehow, impossibly, it was because of her. She kept her head down and continued her work, cleaning the lower chambers since she had been barred from the throne room. The head cook, Martha, who had raised her, watched her with worried eyes, but asked no questions. Martha had taught her long ago that curiosity was dangerous in the palace. 2 days later, Nora was summoned to the Ayanda King's private study. She had never been to this part of the palace, had never climbed these spiraling stairs, or walked these carpeted halls. Everything here screamed of power and wealth, from the paintings of past rulers to the scent of expensive incense burning in silver holders. 2 guards flanked the door, their expressions unreadable as they announced her presence. "Enter," came the king's voice from within, and Nora's hands trembled as she pushed open the heavy door. The study was lined with books from floor to ceiling, thousands of volumes bound in leather and gold. But Nora barely saw them. Her attention was captured entirely by the man standing behind the massive desk and by the woman sitting elegantly in the chair across from him. Lady Cassandra Thornhart, daughter of the Western Alpha and the king's intended bride. Everyone in the palace knew her. Beautiful, sophisticated, powerful in her own right. She looked at Nora, the way one might look at an insect, with mild disgust and the certainty that it could be crushed at any moment. "You may sit," Damien said, gesturing to a chair. But there was a distance in his voice now, a coldness that had not been there in the throne room. Nora perched on the edge of the seat, acutely aware of her plain servant's dress and rough hands compared to Cassandra's silk gown and jeweled fingers. "I have questions about your origins," the king continued, his gray eyes fixed on her but revealing nothing. "You said you were found as an infant. Do you have any memories from before that time? Any dreams or visions that might tell you where you came from? Nora shook her head. No, Your Majesty. I have always been told I was abandoned, that I was unwanted. How convenient, Cassandra murmured, her voice dripping with false sweetness. An orphan with no past suddenly catches the king's attention. One might think it was calculated. Lady Cassandra, Damien said sharply. That is enough. But the damage was done. Nora felt heat rise to her cheeks, shame flooding through her. Of course that was what people would think, that she had somehow manipulated her way into the king's notice. But she had done nothing except exist in the wrong place, at the wrong time. I want you to submit to a blood test, Damien said. And now his voice was purely professional, as if they were discussing crops or taxes instead of something that made his wolf push against his eyes. We have a royal physician who can determine lineage through blood magic. It is a simple process. Why? Nora asked before she could stop herself. Why does it matter where I came from? I am no one, just a servant. Because you are not no one. The words burst from him with unexpected force, and for just a moment, she saw the man from the throne room again, the one who had looked at her like she mattered. But then his mask slammed back into place. Everyone has a history. You deserve to know yours. Cassandra stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is absurd, Damien. She is a servant. There are hundreds of orphans in the kingdom. You cannot investigate them all simply because you feel momentarily charitable. I can do whatever I wish, he said softly, dangerously. I am the king. The two of them stared at each other, and Nora felt the crackle of power and politics in the air between them. This was not about her, she realized. This was about control and crown, and things she could never understand. Fine. Cassandra smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Waste your time on a servant. But when the blood test shows she is exactly what she appears to be, nothing but common stock, perhaps we can return to discussing our upcoming wedding. She swept from the room in a cloud of perfume and barely contained rage, leaving Nora alone with the king. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Finally, Damien moved to a cabinet and poured himself a drink. He did not offer her one. The blood test will happen tomorrow, he said without looking at her. Report to the physician's quarters at dawn. You may go. Nora stood, her legs unsteady. But as she reached the door, she could not help herself. She turned back. Your Majesty, in the throne room, you said this palace could never be my home. What did you mean? Damien's hand tightened on his glass. For a long moment, she thought he would not answer. Then quietly, almost too quietly to hear, he said, Because if you are who I fear you might be, this palace was built on the graves of everyone you should have loved. He looked at her then, and the raw pain in his eyes made her chest ache. And I am the son of the man who put them there. Before Nora could ask what that meant, before her mind could fully process his words, he dismissed her with a wave of his hand. She fled the study, her heart pounding, her thoughts a chaotic mess. She did not sleep that night. Instead, she lay in her tiny servant's room and stared at the ceiling, trying to understand. Who did the king think she was? What graves was he talking about? She knew the history of the kingdom, the story every child learned. 22 years ago, there had been a war. The Lunaris dynasty, who had ruled for centuries, had become corrupt and dangerous. King Aldrich Blackwood, Damien's father, had led a righteous rebellion and claimed the throne. The Lunaris family had been eliminated to prevent future conflict. It was presented as a tragedy, but a necessary one. But the way Damien had spoken, the guilt in his voice, made it sound like something very different. Made it sound like murder. As dawn broke, Nora rose and made her way to the physician's quarters. The elderly doctor, a kind-faced woman named Alara, greeted her with a sad smile that made Nora's stomach drop. "You know," Nora said. "You already know what the blood test will show." "I have my suspicions," Alara admitted. "The king does as well. That is why he is so afraid." She prepared the instruments, a silver blade and a crystal vial that glowed faintly with magical energy. "This will hurt for just a moment. Are you ready?" Nora nodded, though she was not ready at all. How could anyone be ready to learn that everything they thought they knew about themselves was a lie? The blade cut her palm and blood welled up, dark red and ordinary. Alara caught it in the vial, and then began to chant in the old language, words that made the air shimmer and dance. The blood began to glow, brighter and brighter until Nora had to look away. When the light finally faded, Alara stood very still, staring at the vial with an expression of wonder and horror mixed together. "What is it?" Nora whispered. "What does it say?" "You are Lunaris," Alara breathed. "Pure blood, direct line. You are not just related to the old dynasty, child. You are the heir, the only one who survived." The world tilted. Nora reached out and grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling. "That is impossible. I have no wolf. I have no power. I am weak. No." Alara set down the vial with shaking hands. "You were sealed. Someone, probably the last Lunaris priestess before she died, put a binding spell on you as an infant. It suppressed your wolf, your power, even your scent. It made you invisible to those who would hunt you. It saved your life. But that means—" Nora could not finish the sentence, could not voice what this meant. "It means the throne that you have been cleaning for 5 years belongs to you by right," Alara said gently. "It means the king who just touched you in that throne room, who felt the mate bond snap into place despite every impossibility, is the son of the man who slaughtered your parents, your siblings, your entire family. It means your existence is a threat to everything the Blackwood dynasty has built." Nora sank into a chair, her mind reeling. "What do I do?" "I do not know, child. But I do know this." Alara knelt before her, taking her hands. "The seal is weakening. I can feel it. Your wolf is waking up. When it does, when your full power manifests, you will not be able to hide anymore. Everyone will know what you are, and then you will have to choose revenge or mercy, justice or peace, your birthright or your mate." "My mate?" Nora shook her head desperately. "That cannot be real. I felt something when he touched me, but that does not mean anything. He is a king. I am nothing." "You felt it because he is your true mate," Alara said, firmly. "The moon goddess does not make mistakes, even when her pairings seem cruel. And this one is perhaps the cruelest I have ever witnessed. She has bound together the last Lunaris and the current Blackwood, forcing you to love the one person in this world you should hate most." Tears burned in Nora's eyes. "I do not want this. I do not want any of this. Can you not put the seal back? Make me invisible again?" "Even if I could, child, it is too late. The king knows. And knowledge once gained cannot be unlearned." As if summoned by their words, the door burst open and Damien strode in. He looked like he had not slept, dark circles under his eyes, his hair disheveled. "Is it true?" he demanded, looking at Alara. "Is she Lunaris?" Alara stood slowly. "Yes, your majesty. She is Princess Nora Lunaris, sole surviving child of King Marcus and Queen Lyanna. She is the rightful heir to the throne you currently occupy. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the, comments below." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Damien looked at Nora, and she saw everything in his face. Grief, horror, desire, despair, all tangled together in a knot that could never be undone. "Nora," he said her name like a prayer and a curse. "I am so sorry." Then he turned and left. And Nora knew with absolute certainty that her life, such as it was, had just ended. Everything that came after would be something else entirely. The next hours passed in a blur. Ilara took Nora to a hidden chamber deep in the palace, a place warded with old magic that would keep her location secret. "You cannot return to the servant quarters," the physician explained. "Too many people saw you summoned to the king's study. Questions will be asked, rumors will spread. We need time to figure out what to do." What to do? As if there was a simple answer to an impossible situation. Nora sat on the narrow bed and stared at her hands, these same hands that had scrubbed floors and washed dishes and cleaned the throne that was apparently hers by blood. Her mind kept circling back to that moment in the throne room, the way Damien had looked at her, the way something inside her had recognized him, had reached for him even as reason screamed that it made no sense. A mate bond with the son of her family's murderer. It was too twisted to be real, too cruel even for the dark humor of the moon goddess. But Ilara had been certain, and Nora could not deny what she had felt. That electric jolt when he touched her. The way her body had responded to his presence, drawn to him despite every logical reason to run. And now she was trapped in this chamber, hidden away like a dirty secret. While somewhere above her, Damien wrestled with the same impossible choice. Acknowledge her and destroy his family's legacy, or deny her and destroy his soul. Hours later, as moonlight began to filter through the narrow window, the door opened again. But it was not Ilara who entered. It was Cassandra. The lady moved with predatory grace, her silk dress whispering against stone as she closed and locked the door behind her. When she turned to face Nora, her beautiful features were twisted with rage. "So it is true," Cassandra said softly. "The little servant girl is actually a princess. How very convenient." Nora stood, her heart hammering. There was nowhere to run in this small space. And Cassandra was a trained warrior, daughter of an alpha. If she wanted to hurt Nora, there would be nothing to stop her. "Lady Cassandra, I did not ask for any of this. I did not know. Do you think I care?" Cassandra laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Do you think it matters whether you knew or not? You exist. That is the problem. Your very existence threatens everything I have worked toward my entire life." She moved closer, and Nora could see the gold beginning to bleed into her eyes. Her wolf was rising. "I have been groomed since childhood to be queen. Every lesson, every sacrifice, every carefully cultivated alliance, all of it was building toward my marriage to Damien. And now, you appear, some weak little orphan with convenient royal blood, and suddenly I am supposed to step aside? I do not want the throne," Nora said desperately. "I do not want any of this. You can have it. You can have him. Just let me go." "Liar." Cassandra's hand shot out and grabbed Nora's throat, slamming her back against the wall. "You think I have not seen the way he looks at you? You think I do not? Know what a mate bond looks like? He will never choose me now. Not when the goddess herself has declared you his." Nora clawed at Cassandra's hand, gasping for air. Black spots danced across her vision. She tried to fight, but she had no wolf, no strength. She was going to die here in this hidden chamber, killed by a jealous rival before she even understood what her life was supposed to become. But then something inside her stirred. Something that had been sleeping, bound, locked away for 22 years. It felt like fire and moonlight, an ancient rage all mixed together. It felt like her mother's last scream and her father's final stand, and every drop of Lunaris blood that had been spilled on that terrible night 2 decades ago. Nora's eyes snapped open, and she knew without looking that they were no longer brown. They were silver, bright as the full moon, bright as the old magic that ran through her veins. "Let go." Her voice came out layered, double-toned, as if someone else spoke with her. The seal was breaking. Power flooded through Nora's body like a dam bursting. She felt her wolf, her magnificent silver wolf, waking for the first time. And she was furious. Cassandra's eyes went wide with shock and fear. She released Nora's throat and stumbled backward. That is impossible. The seal should have held for years. You should be powerless. I was powerless, Nora said, and her voice still carried that strange double tone. I have been powerless my whole life. But I am done with that now. She did not fully understand what she was doing. Her body moved on instinct, guided by the wolf, and by something deeper, a genetic memory perhaps, knowledge passed down through blood. She raised her hand, and silver light exploded from her palm. The force of it threw Cassandra across the room. The lady hit the wall hard and crumpled to the floor, dazed but alive. Nora stood there breathing hard, staring at her own hand like it belonged to someone else. She had power, real power, the kind that made the air crackle and the stones beneath her feet warm, the kind that her ancestors had wielded when they built this kingdom. The door burst open and guards rushed in, drawn by the sounds of conflict. But they stopped short when they saw her, when they saw the silver light still dancing around her fingers and the wolf shining in her eyes. "Princess," one of them whispered, and he dropped to his knee. The others followed, one by one, until every guard in the corridor was bowing before her. They knew. Just by looking at her, they knew what she was. Behind them, Damien appeared. He took in the scene with a single glance. Cassandra groaning on the floor, Nora glowing with newly awakened power, his own guards kneeling to someone else. To someone who, by every law of blood and succession, had more right to their loyalty than he did. Their eyes met across the chamber. Nora saw her own shock and fear reflected back at her, mixed with something that looked dangerously like pride. "Your Majesty," she whispered, and she was not sure which of them she was addressing. "No," Damien said roughly. He moved past his guards and crossed to her, ignoring Cassandra entirely. "Not Your Majesty. Nora. Just Nora." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched her face. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, and everywhere he touched, the silver light softened and warmed. The wild power flowing through her settled, responding to his presence in a way that terrified and comforted her all at once. "Your wolf has awakened," he said softly. "I can feel her. She is magnificent." "She is angry," Nora admitted. "She knows what your father did. She wants revenge." "I know." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "She has every right to want that. So do you." "But I cannot," she whispered, and tears finally spilled down her cheeks. "I cannot hurt you, even though I should. Even though every part of me that remembers what was lost screams for justice. I cannot hurt you because you are mine." The word hung between them, an admission and a condemnation all at once. Damien closed his eyes briefly, pain flashing across his face. Then he opened them, and she saw the gold of his wolf burning bright. "And you are mine," he said. "My mate, my queen, my destruction." He leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers, his breath warm against her skin. Around them, the guards remained frozen, witnesses to something that would change the kingdom forever. And in the corner, Cassandra watched with eyes full of hatred, already planning her next move. Because this was not over. This was only the beginning. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. The king ordered the guards to take Cassandra to her chambers and post watch outside. She went quietly, but her parting glance at Nora promised retribution. When they were alone, Damien finally stepped back, putting necessary distance between them. "We need to talk," he said, his voice strained. "About everything." He led her to a different chamber, one that had clearly not been used in years. Dust covered the furniture and cobwebs hung in the corners, but there was something familiar about it that made Nora's chest ache. This was your mother's sitting room, Damien said quietly. I remember it from when I was a child, before the war, before everything changed. He lit candles with a wave of his hand, revealing walls painted, with murals of wolves running beneath a silver moon. A child's artwork hung in faded frames, drawings of a family that no longer existed. Nora moved through the room like a ghost, touching things that should have been hers. A music box on the mantel, a book of fairy tales on a dusty shelf, proof that she had once been loved, once been wanted, once been someone's daughter instead of just a nameless servant. My father told me the Lunaris family was dangerous, Damien said from behind her. He said they practiced dark magic, that they were tyrants who would have destroyed the kingdom. He said the war was necessary. I believed him because I was 8 years old, and he was my father. And why would he lie? Nora turned to look at him. In the candlelight, he looked younger, more vulnerable, less like a terrifying king and more like a man carrying a weight that might crush him. But you do not believe him anymore, she said. No. Damien moved to the window, staring out at the moonlit gardens. I started questioning the official story years ago. Too many things did not add up. The brutality of it, the complete elimination of every single Lunaris, even children, even babies. That is not how you stop dangerous rulers. That is how you commit genocide. He turned back to her, his expression haunted. I have spent the last 5 years secretly investigating what really happened. I found witnesses who were paid to stay silent, records that were altered, mass graves that were never supposed to be discovered. Nora, your family was not perfect, but they were not monsters. My father wanted the throne and he took it, and then he rewrote history to make himself the hero. The truth of it settled over Nora like a shroud. Her parents had been murdered not because they were evil, but because someone else wanted what they had. And that someone else had been so thorough, so brutal, that only one infant had survived by sheer luck and powerful magic. Where is your father now? She asked. Dead, Damien said flatly. He died 3 years ago. A hunting accident, though I sometimes wonder if it was truly an accident or if one of his many sins finally caught up to him. He laughed bitterly. I became king, swearing I would be different. I would rule with honor and justice. I would make amends for his crimes. And then the goddess gave me you. He crossed back to her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. Do you understand how impossible this is? I cannot make amends by denying you what is rightfully yours, but I cannot simply hand you the throne and expect my people to accept it. There are those who benefited from my father's coup, who rose to power on the backs of dead Lunaris. They will fight to keep you from taking what is yours. Civil war is not just possible, Nora. It is inevitable. Then what do we do? She asked. We? He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly tender. You speak as if we are a unit, as if we are on the same side. We are mates, Nora said, the word still feeling foreign on her tongue. Does that not mean we are supposed to be on the same side? In a perfect world, yes. Damien's hand lingered against her cheek. But our world is far from perfect. In our world, I am king because my father murdered your family. In our world, you have every reason to hate me. In our world, loving each other might be the most dangerous thing we could possibly do. And yet, Nora whispered, leaning into his touch despite everything. I do not think I can stop myself from doing it anyway. The admission hung between them, too honest, too raw. Damien made a sound low in his throat, half groan, half growl. His control was slipping. She could see it in the way his eyes kept flashing gold, in the tension in his shoulders, in the way his fingers trembled against her skin. You should hate me, he said roughly. You should want me dead. I know. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling it. Thunder beneath her palm. But I do not. I wish I did. It would be so much simpler. Nothing about this will ever be simple. But even as he said it, he was pulling her closer. Nora, if we do this, if we acknowledge this bond, there is no going back. You will be putting a target on your back. Cassandra will not give up. The old families who supported my father will see you as a threat. Enemies will come from every direction. And if we do not acknowledge it? She asked. If we pretend this bond does not exist? Then I will marry Cassandra as planned. You will disappear, given a new identity, and sent somewhere safe. Your Lunaris blood will remain a secret. The throne will stay with my family. He said it as if it were a real option, but Nora could see the lie in his eyes. And we will both be miserable for the rest of our lives, feeling this bond pull at us every single day, knowing our mate is out there somewhere but forever out of reach. That is a terrible plan, Nora said. The worst plan I have ever heard. I know. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. But it is the safe plan. The responsible plan. The plan that does not risk plunging the kingdom into chaos. Nora looked at this man, this impossible man who was both her enemy and her destiny, and she made a choice. She rose up on her toes and kissed him. For a heartbeat, Damien froze. Then he made a sound that was pure wolf and crushed her against him, his mouth claiming hers with a hunger that stole her. Breath. The kiss was everything the throne room had promised and more. Fire and lightning and coming home all at once. His hands tangled in her hair, angling her head so he could deepen the kiss, and Nora felt her newly awakened wolf sing with joy. This was what she had been born for. Not the throne, not revenge. This connection, this impossible, perfect, terrible connection with the one person in all the world who understood what she had lost, because he had lost it too. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. That was a mistake, he said, but he did not let her go. Probably the biggest mistake of my life. Then let us make another one, Nora said recklessly. And another until mistakes are all we have left. He laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. You are supposed to be the cautious one, the servant who kept her head down and survived by being invisible. That girl died the moment her wolf woke up, Norrisu said. I do not know who I am now, but I know I am not her anymore, and I know I am not going to hide. She pulled back enough to look him in the eye. I want the throne, Damien, not because I crave power, but because it is mine, because my parents died for it, because somewhere in the royal crypts are the bodies of my siblings, children who never got to grow up, and someone needs to speak for them. I want justice. Justice, he repeated. Not revenge? Is there a difference? He considered. That. Sometimes. Justice can coexist with mercy. Revenge rarely does. Then I want justice, Nora said firmly. I want the truth told. I want my family's name restored. I want the throne that belongs to me by blood and by right. But I do not want your death, Damien. I do not want to rule over your corpse. I want... She hesitated, the words too enormous to speak. I want us to find a way to make this work. Together. You want everything, he said. But there was wonder in his voice instead of accusation. The throne and the mate bond, power and peace, justice and mercy. You want to rewrite history and forge a new future all at once. Yes, Nora said simply. Is that too much to ask? Probably, Damien admitted. But I think I want to try anyway. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise instead of a claiming. We will have to be smart about this, strategic. We cannot simply announce that you are Lunaris and expect everyone to accept it. We need allies. We need proof. We need a plan that does not end with one or both of us dead. So we work together, Nora said. You teach me how to be royal. I teach you how to be humble." She smiled slightly. "It will be a fair trade." "You think I need to learn humility?" he asked, amused. "You are a king who just spent 10 minutes explaining why you should be king," Nora pointed out. "Yes, I think humility might do you good." He laughed again, and Nora realized with a start that she liked making him laugh, liked seeing the weight lift from his shoulders, if only for a moment. "Very well," Damien said. "We do this together, but we do it carefully. Tomorrow, we announce that I have discovered a lost noble, a distant Lunaris cousin who will be welcomed into the court. It will give you protection and status without immediately triggering a succession crisis. Then we work on building support, gathering evidence, preparing people for the full truth." "And Cassandra?" Nora asked. "She will fight this. She already tried. To kill me once tonight." Damien's expression darkened. "Cassandra will be dealt with. I will break our engagement publicly, return her bride price to her father. If she makes another attempt on your life, she will face the full consequence of assaulting a member of the royal family." "She will hate you for this," Nora said quietly. "She already hates me," Damien replied. "She just hid it better before. Our engagement was always political, never personal. I think part of her will be relieved not to have to pretend anymore." The candles flickered, sending shadows dancing across the walls. Outside, dawn was beginning to break. They had talked through the entire night, negotiating the future, making plans that seemed both brilliant and insane. "I should go," Nora said reluctantly. "People will notice I am missing." "Let them notice," Damien said. "You are not a servant anymore. You do not have to hide." But they both knew she did, at least a little longer. Until the announcement was made, until protections were in place, she was vulnerable. So Nora let him escort her back to the hidden chamber, let him post guards outside who would answer only to him, let him kiss her one more time before he left to begin the dangerous game they had agreed to play. Alone again, Nora lay on the narrow bed and touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. Her wolf purred contentedly in her mind, satisfied now that their mate had been claimed and claimed them in return. But beneath the satisfaction was a current of unease. They were walking a knife's edge. One wrong move and everything would come crashing down. Civil war. Assassination. The end of everything they were trying to build. But as dawn light filled the chamber, and Nora felt her power humming just beneath her skin, she thought maybe, just maybe, they could pull it off. She was Nora Lunaris, daughter of murdered kings, mate to the son of their killer. She had survived 22 years of invisibility. She could survive this too. She had to, because the alternative was unthinkable. The announcement came 3 days later in the throne room, the very room where this impossible journey had begun. Nora stood beside Damien, no longer dressed in servant's clothes, but in a gown of silver silk that had belonged to her mother. Alara had found it in a sealed trunk, perfectly preserved, and when Nora put it on, she felt her mother's presence like a whisper against her skin. The court assembled, everyone from the highest nobles to the lowest functionaries, all of them curious about why the king had called such a formal gathering. Cassandra stood in the front row, her face a mask of composure, but Nora could see the fury burning in her eyes. "I have an announcement," Damien said, his voice carrying through the vast space. "After extensive research into our kingdom's records, I have discovered something remarkable. A member of the Lunaris family survived the war 22 years ago. She has been living among us, unknown and unrecognized, all this time." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Nora felt hundreds of eyes turn to her, assessing, judging, wondering. "I present to you Lady Nora Lunaris, distant cousin of the old royal family. As the last surviving member of that bloodline, she has a rightful place in this court. I am formally acknowledging her and granting her the title and estates that belong to her by blood." It was a careful lie. Distant cousin instead of direct heir. But it was enough to grant Nora protection and status without immediately triggering the chaos that would come with revealing the full truth. One of the old nobles, a man who had clearly risen to power during the Blackwood reign, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, this is highly irregular. How can we be certain this girl is who you claim? Any orphan could be coached to play this role. We need proof." "The proof exists," Alara said, stepping forward from the shadows. "I conducted the blood test myself. Her lineage is unmistakable. She carries the Lunaris magic in her veins, as you will all see when her wolf manifests fully." Another murmur through the crowd, this one more uncertain. Everyone knew the old stories of Lunaris power, the silver wolves that were larger and stronger than any others, the kings and queens who could command the very elements. If Nora truly carried that power, she was not just some distant noble. She was potentially the most powerful wolf in the kingdom. "I propose a test," Cassandra Hay said, her voice cutting through the whispers. She moved forward with predatory grace, a smile on her lips that did not reach her eyes. If Lady Nora is truly Lunaris, then she should have no trouble demonstrating her power. Let her shift before the court. Let us all see this legendary silver wolf. It was a trap. Cassandra knew that Nora's wolf had only just awakened, that she had not yet learned to shift at will. The challenge was designed to humiliate her, to expose her as weak or false. But Nora felt her wolf stir at the challenge, felt the ancient power rise in response to the threat. "Very well," she said, her voice steady. "I accept." Damien shot her a worried look, but Nora stepped forward before he could object. She moved to the center of the throne room, to the exact spot where she had been scrubbing the floor less than a week ago. The irony was not lost on her. "I have never shifted before," Nora said honestly. "My wolf has been sealed since birth. But she is awake now. And she is ready." She closed her eyes and reached for the presence in her mind, the magnificent creature who had been trapped for so long. "Come," she thought. "Show them who we are." The shift hurt. Without years of practice, without the gradual strengthening that came with regular shifting, the transformation was agonizing. Bones broke and reformed, muscles tore and regrew, skin split to make way for fur. Nora felt herself scream, but the sound came out as a howl. And then she was standing on 4 legs instead of 2, looking at the world through wolf eyes. The throne room erupted in chaos, because Nora's wolf was not just silver. She was massive, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, her fur shining like moonlight made solid. Ancient power radiated from her in waves that made the weaker wolves in the room whimper and bare their throats in automatic submission. She was everything the old stories promised, and more. She was Lunaris royalty made flesh. Nora looked directly at Cassandra and let her lips pull back from her teeth in a snarl. The lady stumbled backward, her own wolf cringing in her chest. There was no doubt now. No question of lineage or legitimacy. Everyone in that throne room could feel what Nora was. And distant cousin or not, she was clearly far more than they had been led to believe. Damien approached slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Easy," he said softly. "You did it. You can shift back now." But Nora was not ready to shift back. Her wolf had been caged for 22 years, and she wanted to run, wanted to howl, wanted to make every person in this room understand that the Lunaris dynasty was not as dead as they thought. She turned and leaped, clearing the heads of the assembled nobles, landing gracefully on the dais where the throne sat. For just a moment, she stood there, a silver wolf framed by the massive bloodstone chair, a living reminder that this throne had not always belonged to the Blackwoods. Then she shifted back. The return was easier than the initial transformation, her body remembering now how to move between forms. She stood naked and shaking on the dais, her hair wild, her skin sheened with sweat, but her eyes blazing with triumph. Servants rushed forward with a cloak, covering her, but the damage, or perhaps the revelation, was already done. "Still think she is a fraud?" Damien asked Cassandra quietly. The lady said nothing. She turned and walked from the throne room, her spine rigid with fury. Others followed her, the ones who had most to lose from Nora's existence. But many stayed. Many approached afterward to offer their congratulations, their loyalty, their support. Change was coming. Everyone could feel it. That night, alone in her new chambers that had once belonged to her mother, Nora looked at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back. A week ago, she had been invisible, powerless, nothing. Now she was Lady Nora Lunaris, wolf awakened, mate claimed, destiny unfolding. Her life had become a story, the kind Martha used to read to her from old books when she was a child. Impossible and magical and terrifying, but also hers. Finally, truly, hers. A knock at the door made her turn. Damien entered without waiting for permission, because that was who he was. A king who did as he pleased. But he waited for her to invite him in further, because he was also learning, slowly, to see her as an equal. "You were magnificent today," he said. "Terrifying and magnificent." "I was angry," Nora admitted. "My wolf wanted to hurt Cassandra for challenging us." "But you did not." He moved closer, his eyes warm with approval. "You demonstrated power without violence, strength without cruelty. That is what will make you a great queen." "You sound very certain I will be queen," Nora said. "Are you already planning to abdicate?" "No." Damien took her hands in his. "I am planning something much more complicated, something that has never been done in our kingdom's history." He drew her to the window, where the moon was rising full and bright over the palace gardens. "What if we ruled together? Not you as consort or me as regent, but true co-rulers. King and queen, equal in power and authority. It would require rewriting the succession laws, convincing the council, probably fighting off at least 3 assassination attempts. But it would solve our impossible problem." Nora stared at him. "You would share the throne? Give up absolute power?" "I would share it with you," he corrected. "With my mate. With the woman who was born to rule just as much as I was. Maybe more." He touched her face gently. "You asked if wanting everything was too much. I do not think so. I think maybe the goddess gave us this impossible situation not to punish us, but to force us to create something new. Something better than what came before. A kingdom ruled by both Blackwood and Lunaris," Nora said slowly. "By the son of the conqueror and the daughter of the conquered. That would send a message, would it not? About redemption and healing and moving forward. It would be a symbol," Damien agreed, "of 2 families, 2 bloodlines, 2 histories finally coming together instead of tearing each other apart. It will not erase what my father did. Nothing can. But it might be a start toward making amends." Nora turned in his arms, pressing close against his chest. "You know this will be hard, right? Probably the hardest thing either of us ever does." "I know." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her like she was precious. "But I think we can do it. Together." "Together," Nora echoed, and the word felt like a vow. They stood there as the moon rose higher. 2 people who should have been enemies, bound by fate and choice into something that might save them both, or destroy them. Only time would tell. But as Nora felt her mate's heartbeat steady against her cheek, as she felt her wolf curl contentedly in her mind, as she looked out at the kingdom that was both her birthright and her curse, she thought maybe they had a chance. Maybe love really could bridge the gap between past and future. Maybe 2 broken people could build something whole. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? The road ahead would not be easy. There would be battles to fight, enemies to face, old wounds to heal. But Nora was no longer the invisible servant. Scrubbing floors in the dark, she was awake, she was powerful, and she was finally home.